Okay, see if this is getting started here. Okay. Make sure everything is working before I start doing any of the swatching. Okay. Down there. Okay, I think I'm all good. So what I'm doing is, it's been a while since I've done a stream. I'm going to be swatching some more of the inks. I'm trying to get all of the ones going into my Rolodex here. I've been doing it by brand, and I've got a couple that I'll need to get caught up in the brand. But I have a few new brands that I haven't done yet. My Akkerman, my Birmingham pen company, a couple of one-ofs where I have like one ink from the brand. So try and get those going. And let's see. That's the camera I want there. Now the one thing I'm not seeing is the chat. Hello, Nicole. Why am I not seeing my chat window? See if I can just do it this way. Okay, I think that's going there. Test that. Well, give me 1 second. My pop-up for the chat messages changed. So take me 1 second to fix that. Okay, so let's test that again. There we go. Now we have pop-ups. When people say something, I can make it pop up. Okay. So I'll just leave that up there. And let's get to some actual inks. So what I'm done here is, let me pop over to this camera. I have the ink maker, and then I have in there, I'm just doing a simple swatch with a glass stirring rod, and then sorting them by brand in here. And then eventually this side is going to be a pen inventory. Let me check that, Nicole. Thank you for letting me know. See if I can just move the mic closer and see if that helps. Is that better now? Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know. That's the hard thing with streams, is you hear yourself in your headphones, but you don't know exactly what kind of volume is coming through in the other. So what I'm going to be doing is, I'm going to make a new card for these inks that I haven't done yet for the brands. And I'll show that of what I've been doing there, because in this vintage Rolodex, I can't just put the cards in. I have to bend them a little bit in order for them to fit, because of this little lip that I didn't realize was a thing when I bought this, but just have to adapt. Okay, so all I'm doing, start with this here. Is these cards fit, the cards themselves fit perfectly fine. It's just that tab. So I've just been using my little ruler and getting a good spot to stop and crease. Fold it back, push it down, and then that's all it really needs. It's just that little bit in there. So today we've got Akkerman. Let's see, Colorverse. Birmingham Pen Company. What do we got? We got a Robert Oster. We have a Vanessa. And a couple of Papier Plume. A KWZ. And what else did I grab? I've got a J.R. Bond. And, oh, and then what is this? The Novelore. Okay, so I'll bend those as we go, but that should be enough to kind of clear these away. Let's get to the important part of actually messing with the inks. Okay, so here's what I'm using in terms of tools. I've got, and I learned this from Olive Octopus ink, you know, lucky to have a ink encyclopedia be in our local pen club. These are just little glass stirring rods like you'd use for stirring drinks or something. They're easy to clean, and because they're not Q-tips, you get truer color when you're doing the swatch. So let's get started with Akkerman. Now, if you're not familiar with Akkerman bottles, before I tilt this one up, this shows really well that it's got a marble that sits in there, and it's got this upper chamber. So the upper chamber, you just do that, and now it holds ink in the upper for you to be able to, and I should have probably loosened that a little bit. My hands are, there we go. So once you have that open, you can fill your pen from in this top part of the bottle. But for what we're doing, just getting some ink on the rod. And I haven't been trying to do any kind of special design. I'm just kind of doing a general swatch across the middle, I guess you'd call it, for these. And since I don't do any painting, yeah, the Akkerman bottles really are some of the best. Eventually I want to own more of them. It's just, you know, you never, trying to limit what I get. And then for writing the names on, I'm just using this is a portable glass dip nib that I take with me when I go to pen club, because I can cover the tip up and not have to worry about it in my bag. But then you can get it, screw the cap on the back, and you actually have a decent sized pen to be able to write with. So this is Akkerman. Number 9. Just indigo. Yeah, that would be much harder if Vanessa was not a 5-hour drive for me, but their online shipping is so quick. I ordered actually something last night, and it's already in transit to me today. So, you know, that can also be very wonderful and dangerous for the wallet. So what I'm doing after I do these is I just put them up here and let them dry, and then switch over here. What we'll end up doing is putting in the Akkerman card, and then after those have had a chance to dry, we'll put them in. And I'm not sorting in here by any kind of color or order. I'm just doing them by brand, because I have my other swatch cards in more of a color wheel, like the small coloring cards. So this is more of a home reference. I'm obviously not going to be carrying around the Rolodex with me. So let's move on to the next Akkerman. This is the Dutch Masters Limited, and this is the Vermeer, Steenrode van Vermeer. Do you know which number that one is, Nicole? That's the one thing with Akkerman, having the numbers. It's handy to be able to keep track of what is what. These bottles are being slippery. There we go. And one thing when swatching, always have paper towels handy because you really want to avoid any kind of mess if possible, obviously. I have a couple of these just sitting to the side, and if you haven't used these shop towels like you'd find in the auto parts section of your store, they're some of the best things for ink. They're more absorbent and they're thicker, so ink is less likely to pass through the towel and onto your hands, which is always a plus. And I'm just grabbing, you can see I've got a stack of glass rods here. I'm just using a different one for each color for the time being, and then dumping them into a, you can't see off the camera, but a little bowl of water to clean them off. And even with Akkerman, they've got the two different size bottles. I've got 3 of the large bottles and 1 of the small bottles. And that marble in this one is fighting me getting that glass rod in. I have this ink in my Newton that I got the Architect ground at the Arkansas Pen Show from Matthew Chin. I'm really liking this color. It's kind of a brownish burgundy, I guess is the best way to describe it. I think the camera is showing it a little dark. That's one thing, unfortunately, this overhead camera does not show the truest color. Before I put them into the Rolodex, I will hold it over to the side camera, which does a better color representation. So make sure the dip pin is cleared off. And one thing, if you're not familiar or you're not used to using glass dip pins, there's a drip on there that makes sure you tap the drip off so you don't start with a nice ink blot right when you go to writing. This is the Akkerman Dutch Masters. Make sure I'm writing this correctly. Steenrode van Vermeer. Okay, get that one over here to dry. Get this bottle closed up. That's interesting. I thought all of theirs had a number, but I guess, looking at it, the Dutch Masters are just by name, so I guess they do have a little bit of variation. And then let's go to my other Dutch Masters that I have. This is the Hals Oud Bruin, which is kind of a light brownish yellow. It's an interesting color. Man, these bottles are just wanting to fight me today. Okay. This is an interesting color because it's got hints of yellow, hints of green, hints of brown. So, when you're using it, it's kind of depending on how thick the ink goes, as most inks, but this one, it shows it even more of that different variation. Also Bruin. glass dip nib wiped off there. And then my final Akkerman, this is actually the first bottle of ink that I ever purchased in 2014. Before Akkerman even really labeled their bottles. This was the Shocking Blue. So this is my oldest bottle of ink. The ink is still that super sheening blue that you'd expect from Akkerman. Number 5. I do that for some bottles. These Akkerman, honestly, it's hard to have a bowl that's big enough to set them in, especially the big bottles. The biggest thing I've run into on these is there's a, if I can switch over to this camera here, there's a little cardboard seal in there, and that will get stuck on the top of the bottle sometimes, and that has caused more spills of this ink for me than anything else, because that little cardboard part gets caught in the top of the bottle and then comes off. But for small bottles, you're 100% correct, Nicole. Using either the little 3D printed stands that people are making or dishes that are meant to hold the bottles to prevent those spills is definitely a good practice. Now, am I going to be doing that practice on this stream today? I am not, because I didn't think about it beforehand, and I've got only so much desk space to fit everything on where I can easily get to it, because with streaming I don't necessarily want to be getting up and down during the stream. And this has always been such a dark ink, and I just love it. It's, for being the first ink, and the fact that this bottle was almost still completely full, because as I got more inks I was starting to use more, but this bottle will literally probably last me forever. Okay. So that is all of the Akkermans that I have. I only have 4 currently, but I was very close to adding another bottle into my cart last night, but I held off because my wife wanted the Colorverse 2024 ink of the year, the Blue Dragon or something like that, so we ended up getting that ink instead. So I will do Birmingham next. I only have 3 of them. That's a newer one for me. Let me pop this over. So just to show this color, as best as I can to get some good light on it. This is the number 9, the Oost Indigo. I have this in my new D2 or D Squared Arts pen that I just recently released a video on. That indigo ink looks great with that white pen, a good juxtaposition. And then this one should have dried by now as well. That kind of shows that burgundy. There's a little bit of sheen in there, like a greenish sheen on the edges. Come on, focus better. But that's a good color as well. Come on, focus. There we go. So you can see a nice red with the green edges. Get that put in there. And eventually, as I add more, there's a chance, once again, from Lisa Olive Octopus, she does brands in her Col-O-Dex, and then she'll do a different divider card for the lines within the brand. So I could eventually make a Dutch Masters divider if I get more. We've got the Bruin, so it's got that, as it dries, it darkens up a little bit, but you can see on the writing stays pretty light, so it's a kind of a brownish, goldish yellow depending on the light, so it's a neat color. Not one, I have it in a pen, but it's not one that I would use all that often. I think my wife really likes it. It's similar to one of the other inks I'll be swatching later in the stream, the KWZ Honey. It's got a similar look to that. And then the Shocking Blue is going to need some more time to dry. That's one thing with this ink, is it's not a quick dryer, so it definitely needs some more time. So Birmingham, I've got 3 different ones. Nicole, since you were wondering, do you have a preference of the Savarite, the Ohio River, or Lake Erie to be first? The Savarite is a greenish, the other two are tealish, if you're not familiar with those three. Making sure the caps are all not crazy tight before I get into these. So let's find the Birmingham card here. Okay, we will do the Ohio River first. Get that one there, fold that over. Okay, so Ohio River, and then we'll do the other two. So when I got these inks, I put them all in individual pens. I really like them. They're good consistency. And I tend to have a lot of bluish teal inks, so they fit into my normal writing color scheme pretty well. Lately I've been expanding that to other color families, but if I had to boil down most of my inks, they're going to be in that blue teal. And I found with my swatching doing it like this, it takes about 3 dips into the ink to get a good amount to do this kind of consistent swatch amount on these cards. Just so I'm trying to keep them as all even as possible, so I'm comparing like to like. And then once I have it on there, I am kind of spreading it around to have a little bit of hot, spots that have lighter concentration and darker. These three, I think, were in like a special pack when I got them. It was like a Facebook ad that's like, hey, we got these inks, and there's a special if you buy them now. Or it was like buy 2, get the 3rd free or discounted. But no complaints on any of them. This is Birmingham. And there's actually you can make a really cool color similar to this that we learned from going to Butler Stationery. If you mix Lamy Turquoise with a couple of drops of Diamine Pumpkin, it will make a similar kind of dark teal color. The shop uses Lamy Turquoise as their demo ink, and there was someone dipped a pen into the ink one day, Jonathan was saying, and he was writing with it. He's like, what is this color? And that's what it was. The Diamine Pumpkin ink mixed in with the dip of the turquoise blue ended up with that kind of cool color. I think it might be more similar to the Lake Erie that we'll see here in a second. Yeah, I've noticed that, Nicole, that they do bundles often, and when they do releases, they seem to do releases in batches. So, most of my inks are going to come either from Vaness or from Gentleman Stationer, the local store, or my home store away from home being Vaness. But for some brands, obviously, you have to branch out and get them direct from the manufacturer. So as I add more inks, I'll definitely look at adding some more Birmingham. They've got some cool colors that I've seen recently, either on people's streams or in the advertisements that pop up. So this one is the Lake Erie. Try and get a good mix of highs and lows. And this one is on the more, it's not as much teal. It's a little bit more of the darker green side. And this one looks like it's staying on pretty wet. Let me pop it over to this. So you can see when it's wet and going on, it's more of a darker green with hints of blue. And we'll see what it looks like once it actually dries. But that is going on there pretty thick. And then the final, and this is an interesting one because I think it was Gourmet Pens who posted a while back someone looking for a bottle of this. It's a green, and I don't have many green inks, so didn't necessarily want to give it up if it's now no longer available. That's the thing with inks, is sometimes they are limited edition. And if it turns out to be an ink you really like, I would hate to like try it later on and be like, oh, I really like that, I want to use it again, and then if I'd given the bottle away. And actually, I haven't used this ink, and I almost put a green ink into the D Squared Arts. This might be the ink I put in it when I refill it. It's actually a really nice green color. Chrysanthemum, sterling silver, interstellar bronze, eroded bronze, waterfront dusk, mulberry silk, and 2 earlier shimmers. Interesting combination. What is the sterling silver? I mean, is it just a good... is it more on the shiny side, or is it more on the gray side? Okay. So that's the Birminghams. Shuffle these over to the edge. I'll actually do these two next. So I think the Shocking Blue has probably had enough of a time to dry. So let's switch cameras here. So there's the Shocking Blue. You can see that sheen. I mean, it shows in even bad light, but it sheens a little bit reddish purple. So just a cool color. And of course, in its Shocking Blue fashion, it had a little bit on the bottle that is now on the bottom of the card, so that stays true to, what I would expect from that, being a slower dryer. So of the Birmingham, it looks like Ohio is dry now. And that one does, you were saying teal, Nicole. That one does dry to a nice teal, like a good color. So that's the Ohio River. And it looks like Lake Erie and Savorite, I'm going to say his pronunciation on that, are still needing some more dry time, so we'll leave those a little longer. So up next, we need to get the Robert Oster card and the Vanessa card. Now, this is one that I'm not certain. Do I put the Robert Oster Vanessa Special Edition ink in Robert Oster, or do I put it under the Vanessa? I was thinking Robert Oster because I could still reference it, and the Vanessa one is obviously mixed in-house, so that's what I originally planned. If you have any comments on that, throw them up in the chat, because I'd love to know if that's, do I put Robert Oster and then do like a Vanessa line, because I know they've made a few for them, or do I just, divide them by looking at the card? I think that could go either way and not really have too much, because this is my personal reference for the house, but I could see both if wanting to have all the special edition inks for a store together. That would also make sense. And just get that, or I can fold that over. Okay, so let's start with the blue. I actually have that in my Pins by Pasquale Merlin right now. I've been using it lately. It's a nice, really light blue. Yeah, I might shuffle these around because I have plenty of these divider cards. So after I do this, because now that I'm thinking about it, I already made 2 individual cards. So maybe I'll make a Vanessa line card. So let's actually start with this one then instead of the blue, because I'll need to make the other card. This was the Arkansas Pen Show ink for this year that I've actually already written through, filling pins, 2.5 times with this and pulled a sample. And since this was a limited edition, I think Lisa said she only made 19 bottles of this or something. It's called Fresh as a Daisy, and it's supposed to emulate the color of the South right now, which is a pollen color. And this is not a color I would normally use, but this is the only ink that's been in my Newton Prospector so far, and I don't plan on changing that anytime soon. I've been loving writing with it. It's a sheener, which I'm not a big shimmer user. I do like a decent sheen, or sorry, this isn't a sheener, this is a shader. I do like a shading ink, occasional sheen, not much shimmer. But look at that lime green. I mean, that's just a great color. Yeah, I think, Nicole, you're right that doing a special tab makes sense, because I know there's the Robert Oster Hemp. There's, I think, Bless Your Heart was also a Robert Oster. So, I mean, look at that color, though. That is such a nice, vibrant light green. You know, and you can see that shade coming through. Well, yeah, and that's where I think the ones that Vanessa is making in store, like this one, I'll put in the Vanessa card. But then, if they're doing a Robert Oster or a, you know, whatever the other brand, I can do a line in there. So let me grab one of my other cards here. So what I'll do, let me switch cameras back, is I'll put the line. So these dividers are going this way. I'll have this one go this way inside the one to show that it's the Vanessa section. So grab the roller ball here. And that's probably hard to see, but I wrote Robert Oster for Vanessa on there. I think that's how I'll differentiate these. And then get it folded over so it will file. Okay, so that's gonna solve that. So let's see. Get the, that's the Birmingham, still need to go in there. So put the Vanessa. And another thing I've been loving about this Fresh as a Daisy is it seems to dry nice and quick. So I already got that one in there. Put that in. And I think these other two, while I've got this camera switched. There's the Lake Erie, so a nice dark tealish. You know, you can see the teal popping out, but it's also got a little bit of more navy side to it where it's thicker ink going down. So that's going to go in Birmingham here. And then this green, which, you know, that's the thing when you buy a lot of inks and you don't really get to use a lot of them. You've doing things like this, you discover a new ink that you're really excited to use that you already own. Because that's a nice looking green. So that's definitely going to need to go in a pen as soon as I've written one down. The Savarite? I'm not fully certain on the pronunciation of that, but we'll go with it. And then I've got this over here. We're going to do the Robert Oster card, and then we'll put the Vanessa. So those will just sit like that. And I haven't seen Bayou. One that I saw a sample of that Vanessa made and they haven't made again, that I think there's a small group of people trying to get it, is the Gator Gar, which was another cool green. Chad had a sample of that at the pen show, and I think he gave one to Lisa Alabactua, so she swatched it on one of her Twitch streams. So that was a cool color. Okay, so back over to the swatching. This is the Robert Oster Blue River, I think is the name. Yeah, Blue River, the Vanessa edition. And this was actually my first, and as of now, only Robert Oster ink. But I like the consistency of it. It seems to write really well, especially in my extra fine nibs. Because that's one thing, you know, some inks, they really need that thicker nib in order to perform well, and this one has been performing great in an extra fine. So that's not always the case, so I'm very appreciative of that. And this is just such a good color. This color really pops. Yeah, I have two Papier Plume inks that I'm actually swatching today that, you know, it'll be interesting to see what the colors look like now, because I've owned them for over a decade, I think, at this point. They were some of the early inks I got when Vanessa first started carrying them, or maybe I got it when Papier Plume was vending Arkansas in like 2015. I don't remember. I don't think when I went to the Papier Plume shop in 2016, 2015, I think it was 2016, that I bought a bottle of ink there, because I don't remember having to fly back with it, but I could have done it then too. I don't really remember. Man, just seeing that write down like that, this is such a great blue. Okay, so put that up there to dry. So since we're talking about Papier Plume, let's do those next. And I don't even know if they still make these. That's where I really need to look up, because I'm sure they've changed their bottles and everything by now, but this is a small bottle of moss green and oyster gray. And I'm actually going to shake these up because I have had them a while and I don't know if stuff would have settled. I mean, they've been moved around as I've been reorganizing things. That, yeah, Nicole, that blue is just a beautiful color. So I'm going to start with this one here, which is the oyster gray. And for when I write with a gray ink, I like it to be on the darker side. I don't like it to be so light that when I'm actually writing, I can't really tell the letters. Especially with being a small writer, that's something I'm more conscious of. It's like the Platinum Citrus Black. It's a cool ink once it dries, but when you're writing with it, it's so yellow. It's really hard to tell what you're writing. Yeah, so this is a blue-gray, I would call it, the way it's laying down. And it does seem to be good on color still, which I'm glad, because it still have quite a bit of this. Okay. And it's always interesting to see just the different bottle shapes. You know, there's very few inks that have even remotely similar bottles. So I kind of like that at times, but I also kind of don't like it, because if you're trying to keep a good organization of the bottles on the shelf, it's very challenging when everything is a different diameter or shape. You can't have good even rows. And much less, I still keep the boxes for a lot of inks on a different shelf. And that's even worse, trying to stack the boxes all around that are completely different shapes. So let's see. Pop this over here. Yeah, so that blue is just great. Going to get this filed in. And then we'll put on the Papier Plume tag after that. Oyster Gray is going to need to dry a little more, so let's go on and do the Moss Green. Yeah, I've noticed that their bottles are different now, and that's where, I think this was when they were really new to making inks, and now they make inks for a lot of people. You can contact them and they'll mix a batch, which is cool. But there was on the Inkdependent stream a while back talking about bottles of Fuyu Seiyouken, the Iroshizuku Gray. People have bottles that have been sitting around for a long time. The color had changed either in the bottle or the recipe had changed, so people were doing a comparison. So this is the Moss Green, and I would describe this, to use one of Olive Octopus Lisa's terms, a swampy green. It definitely has that kind of swampy description of yellowish, greenish, brownish mix. So like this little bottle is almost where if you were using a big nib, it would barely fit in there. So that's another pet peeve of mine where like the small colorverse bottles, you can't fit the nib in there. So you have to decant it out into something else in order to use it. So that, my wife put this in a pen a while back, and I think we might not have shaken it up enough because it was writing really light and not performing well. But with shaking that up, that looks like it went on into a nice, color. And I know the perfect ink to follow up with that. It's another one of, but the KWZ Honey, which is obviously honey colored, but it's going to have a little bit more yellow version of that. So that'll be a good follow up here. Yeah, that's a good description. Green gold with orange undertones. There's a little bit of the orange kind of mixed in there. And as I've gotten into learning watercolor, the whole mixing colors to get the color you want, you didn't like the honey. Interesting. I got it when it first came out. I think it's when Vanessa first started carrying KWZ, and it was kind of like the it ink to get at the time. And I haven't used it all that much, but it is a good color. It's a decent color. It's not a color I would use often. But this is the opposite, talking about the size of the neck of the bottle. You could put any size nib in here, even like a folded calligraphy nib, and still have plenty of room. This reminds me a little bit of Diamine Ancient Copper, which some people love. I'm not a fan of because it always gets crusty. Once it hits the air, the bottles get crustier. It'll crust up in a nib. But to me, it's a similar-ish color. I mean, not exact, obviously, but that does look like a jar of honey. So, okay, flow, that would make sense. I do remember it's kind of a thicker ink, and I can even see that on the swatching. So I guess I got to write the title in there. From a flow standpoint, I can definitely see that being an issue. Maybe they were trying to emulate actually as if you were writing with honey to make it thick, and you can only do so much with it. Probably not, but it's a good theory if nothing else, because it does lay down very thick. So that's the KWZ Honey. Oh, you like the thickness, Bailey, of the KWZ, that it is a thicker ink? Gotcha. Rich and juicy, that makes sense. And hello. Okay, so we've got a few more left. We've got 2 Novelor, 1 J.R. Bond, 2 Rohrer and Klinger, and then a makeup of a Lamy ink I missed, and a new Diamine that I didn't have. So let's do the J.R. Bond, because that's a one of. Yeah, and I guess it would depend on how you're using it, Nicole. If you're writing like pages in a journal or something, that's going to be a different interruption than writing like a title or something like that. So I guess, how you're using it as within ink can also affect perception of how it performs for you. Exactly. That's why there's so many. Each person can get the ink that performs and looks how they want it. And if it's not the exact color, you mix them up and make the color you want for yourself. So this is an ink that I don't think I've ever actually put in a pen. Like I said, not the biggest green ink user in the past. But this is the J. Bond. I think it's mint green. When I've used an ink, a green, I normally use the Mont Blanc Irish green. That was always my go-to green. This is a similar color. It's just, I was really bad about not experimenting with a lot of ink colors when I first got into pens. I'd find one that I like, and then that was it. I didn't need to experiment and find another one. Getting a lot better about that now. Let me make sure yeah, so Lierre Sauvage. And my French class from high school, could not translate that, but now my latest green that I got, I actually have in a pen. It's the Teranishi Guitar Gentle Green. That has become quickly one of my favorite inks. That the way it sheens over into when it goes down, it goes teal and then dries into. His name is Daryl Bailey. Daryl Davis, and he'll be at Sean Newton's table. Okay, so let's switch back over here. And KWZ is still drying, but it looks like the Papier plumes should have dried enough. So there's that. Then that dries really nice. That's a darker gray, so I might actually have to give that one a chance again as well. So the darker gray there, the oyster gray. And then the moss green. That even dries, This is fun because getting to relearn these inks after time, I'm finding hidden gems that I've already owned or owned for, embarrassing, 10 years and never used. So, okay, we'll pop the JR Bond in there. And this KWZ honey, I'll hold it up, but obviously it still needs to dry, as of the previous conversation of rich and thick. It's obviously not a quick dryer, so that's going to take its time as well. So let's move on and let's hit the... Sorry, I'm shuffling inks around to make sure I don't miss one here. So those are all done. Okay, here's what's left. So let's do the Novelor next. Now these I mainly bought because they were something different at Gentleman Stationery when I was there one day. Yeah, Nicole, with you being localish, Bailey's been watching, I know, all of Octopus's streams and seeing the pen that she got from Daryl and then the one that I got. And Lisa instructed people, and I've reinforced, if you're going to Chicago, go to his table and touch the pins, because that's really what Daryl said in our interview, is that he wants people to touch the pins and experience them. He wants them to be carried and used and not necessarily, you don't want to be rough with them, but he doesn't want them babied. He wants them to have patina and have a unique experience. So this is the Mango Sorbet by Novelor Explorer. I don't know if that's a line, or I guess they both say that. I'm just going to put Novelor. I know they have a few other colors, but I don't think they have a ton of inks yet. Bailey, are you still on the train to Chicago? And this does have a mango look to it. It's almost like a lighter. This is almost like a different honey in a way. Like if you thought of a lighter honey mix, I could see this also being viewed as kind of a honey color. How much longer do you have? An hour out? Okay. Yeah, and I feel bad, Nicole, because I kind of got so busy since I bought my Newton day one. I was so caught up with using that and getting my grinds done. I never took time to meet with Daryl that much. I went up there after and said, hey, I'd like to do an interview at some point, but I kind of ran out of time there, but luckily we were able to get in contact. And actually, it's not going to work out this time, but Scott from TriStar sent me a message, and he's interested in coming out to one of the Arkansas meetups. So not the May one, but maybe the June one. You might have a couple of Nashville people making a road trip out for the Arkansas Pen Club meetup. Nothing's definite, but that would be fun. So let's get that Narvaler put in there. Okay, and then this one is Dark Forest. And Beth had this in a pen for a while. I think it's a pretty dry ink from what I remember. It dried out on her pretty quickly in her Novelor that she had it in. But it's supposedly like a, dark foresty green based off the name. And I don't know that many people who've been using the Novelor inks to know if all of them are drier or perceived drier. Because this, to me, and swatching this, looks like it's a really thick wet ink. So maybe with that thickness, it was just drying up in the nib and preventing it from flowing. But, oh, congratulations. Yeah, our pen club doesn't really have any kind of offices or anything in Middle Tennessee. We're more, now our pen club does meet every Saturday, which is amazing in its own right. There's always a group. We kind of alternate between a couple of different restaurants, so it's a little bit more frequency than I can commit to, but we normally go every other week if we don't have other plans. Well, I've actually been on the Arkansas Pen Show, our Pen Club mailing list since 2015. I think when I joined, the president's name was Grayling Hill, if I remember correctly. And so I've been on the email list forever just because, it's pen stuff. Might as well stay, see what's going on. So you can see that is a dark green, and that is still really wet. That's going to have to dry out and see if it lightens up much as it dries. But definitely a dark green. And let's look here. Looks like KWZ. I'm still going to give it a little bit more time. It's still looking pretty wet on there. So the J.R. Bond, it does look like it's dried pretty well. Yeah, Bailey, I mean, it's easy enough and hard enough to start a club, I would say. There's probably other people there, you just don't know they exist. So once you find them, then, meet up once a month, like San Antonio Pen Club. Thanks for stopping in, Nicole. It's been fun, good comments and whatnot. But once you kind of find the people, then it's going to be a lot easier to, kind of get the club going. I think a good example is the San Antonio Pen Club. The guy who kind of started up, I guess it's a new version of it. That mango sorbet looks like it's still wet. I'm going to give it a little bit more time to dry. My Instagram suggested him to me after Arkansas because he had been at the Arkansas show. Well, my friend Ann lives in San Antonio, and she didn't know there's a pen club. So she was kind of like you, a pen person without a club. So I sent her the link, and she went to their first meetup, and now I think they have another one this Saturday, and Queen of Washi, I think, is supposed to go to that too. So, you know, people are learning about the club, and then, you know, as you hear about it from somewhere else, you can even help enable other friends at other pen clubs, which is kind of cool. Yeah, it can start small. I mean, 2 or 3 people, honestly, sometimes the smaller club meetups are better than the big ones because you get more time to talk to people. It's less, I want to look at every pen that every person brought. And then if you're sitting at a table at a restaurant, you can only really talk to about the people on either side of you, across from you, and maybe diagonally, depending on how loud the restaurant is or stuff like that. So it can be challenging, but let's go ahead and knock this one out. This is, because it wasn't the normal Lamy bottle, this is part of the Lamy Crystal series. When I did my initial Lamy video, or swatching of the Lamy inks in the past, completely missed this one on the shelf. Bailey, I think one of the best things to do is like start an Instagram for it. I think that's what the San Antonio guy did, and then it's something that can be shared. You know, there's enough pen people here in between all the Discords and Pen Addict and, you know, Ink Dependence and whatnot. Sharing it can get a pretty good audience because there's a good chance that somebody is in already one of those existing audiences to see it and go, hey, that's me. I'm in that area. And, you know, the Northeast area, I believe that's where you're based, with public transit being a lot more of a thing there versus down here in the South. People might be able to hop on a 45-minute train ride versus a multiple hour drive to go to a pen meetup, you know. So that also factors in as well. An Instagram account. Because then it can be shared around social media wise, and the algorithm help find the people in those areas. Because like I said, that's how it worked for the San Antonio group. I happened to see that post because it was suggested to me because they were at Arkansas, and then I was able to direct it to Anne. And then when I noticed the other day that Queen of Washi was San Antonio based, I was able to mention, hey, have you seen this? So, you know, it only takes the right people to see it to help pass along to their already existing friends to spread that along. So this is Lamy Crystal. Now I'm second guessing that I'm saying that crystal, and I don't remember the exact name of this. So I'm actually going to leave the name off of there. And I'll have to come back and add that in, so that way I'm not having to correct it on the card. But I'll at least have it in with the other Lamy inks. Okay, so we've got 4 more to go, so we'll move on to the Rohrer and Klinger. And I don't even remember where I got these inks. I don't remember buying them, but I've had them, and they're actually decent colors. I inked a pen up with the blue one. That'll be the next one a while back, and it was actually a nice color. And I did not apparently make a card for this, so let me reach over here. But I'm sure the whole pen community will help. You know, it's always great when people have a local club, because online is great, but it's different when you can, you know, meet up with people in person, even though most of us in general, I would say, are extroverted introverts, where introverted until you get talking about something you like pens and paper, and then we don't shut up. Or someone like me who has fought for years and developed a particular set of skills to not be in front of a camera and now have a YouTube channel. Go figure. So, Rohrer and Klinger here. And I'm almost out of my swatching stick, so I'll have to get one out and clean for the last couple. But this is a magenta. So this is, I've used a few purple inks, but I've never really, this is not one. This reminds me though of how the Platinum Lavender Black dries. But yeah, I wish I could remember where I got these. You know, they've been on the ink shelf, and they could have been a giveaway at a Pelican Hub or something like that. I really just don't remember, which is kind of bad. But also, I'm nowhere near the ink collection of some people. I think I'm around 125, 126, and a lot of those, like 50 of those, are from the last doing two Inkvent calendars. But still, I wish I could at least remember where I got the others in the past. Okay, so then this one is Koenigsblau, so royal blue. Hey, Jana. So sketch ink and alt Goldgrün. Interesting. See, and I'm also glad that I'm not into calligraphy, because I don't have to have a whole set of inks that are not fountain pen and then a set of inks that are calligraphy inks. That would get even more confusing, because I know our local art store that also happens to sell pens, paper and ink arts, they've got a whole selection of like tons of Ferris wheel press, because they have all the calligraphy inks. So they also have all their fountain pen inks, but they only sell, I think, like some Kavekos and maybe a couple of Esterbrooks. But I really like this. This is a good royal blue. This is the one I put in. I might have put this in my Anoto when I did that video. Okay, so only two more to go after this, so let's get some of these others sorted so we've got a little bit more room here. I think KWZ has probably finally dried enough. So it definitely dries dark. You know, yeah, it's definitely dry, but the dark honey. Bailey, thanks for stopping in. Hope you have a good time at the pen show. You know, hope your wallet is treated well, or also not treated well, depending on how you view that. You know, pen shows can be great and terrible for the finances. Okay, so here was the Narvalor Mango Sorbet. So that's almost like you can see the mango color, but I could also see it in some of this light, depending on the angle, like a light honey color. You know, if you get the honey in the bear jar, it has more of a color like that versus the local honey or something that's going to be darker. And then here's the other Narvalor, the Dark Forest. That definitely does dry into just a dark green, almost a green black. You know, it dries so dark that you can see the green, but if you were just glancing down, you might not see the green until you give it a second look. So get that one in there. And then let's find where the Lamy section is. Here we go. The Lamy Crystal. I'll have to find that box. This was actually my wife's first ink she bought when we first went to Fountain Pen Hospital, what, a year and a half ago, when she got her first pen. That, oh, I'll only never need one pen and one ink, and now she's 3 pen cases in, a full fleet of Twisbys, Narvalors, Pelicans, and more. So this was her gateway ink of sorts. Okay, and then Roar and Klinger, I'm going to give those a little bit more time to dry, so pop back over there. got those. I'll slide them up here so they can show. Okay, so that card goes there. So I've got another makeup of a diamine. This I bought, if you saw the recent video of the TriStar Studios, I was at the shop, bought this to literally be able to ink the pen up immediately from TriStar. And this is actually one of my first blue blacks. I guess Shinkai is technically a blue black, but this is the first one that is called a blue black ink, just diamine blue black. The gentleman stationer, if you're a patron of his, or if you're not, you might consider it. He just had a patron-only Discord start. There's been some good blue-black ink conversation going on in there. Kind of the inaugural ink section of there going in about people talking about different blue-blacks, what their favorites are. And I'm so new to the blue-black arena, I didn't really have much to offer, but it's great to read people who've tried all of them or are still in the search for their perfect blue-black. And another thing that's interesting that he just launched is he's doing his first surprise boxes. So I think he only launched with 10. I was able to get one of them. So sometime in the next week or so, I'll get a surprise box of, it was $50. And in there you get over $50 worth of stuff that you don't know what it is. And I like that. I haven't really done a subscription box of any sort. And it's not a true subscription. It was a one-of for him to test the waters. But seeing as all 10 sold out within like a day, I think that's definitely something that he'll probably continue doing. I mean, that'll be a nice surprise to see what you end up with, paper or ink or washi or who knows what. So that'll be cool to see how that develops. Okay, so that's diamine blue black. And then last but not least, this is the Colorverse Coffee Break. And I bought this one when I bought the Colorverse, or the Schaefer 100 Coffee Edition. I just needed a coffee ink to go with the coffee pen. It made perfect sense. And this actually needs to be refilled. So while I'm doing this swatch, I'm going to go on and fill that back up, because why not? I think that's the only ink that'll ever go in that pen. They kind of were a package deal in my mind when I got it. So now there are some other coffee inks I want to try. I really like the new Esterbrook Coffee Monsters Co. release, and I didn't order it initially, but I could see getting one of those. I don't have any of the nibs from Gina yet, so getting the journaler nib in that is probably in the future. Once those have kind of, seems like Esterbrook is going to keep making a lot of those because it was so popular and sold out so quickly that that's going to be a, anybody who wants one of those will probably be able to end up with them, because I think that was just I don't know if they expected the kind of response it gave, but it seemed to have been massive from everything, seeing her YouTube talking about it and all the different shops like Yoseka and, the official releases in LA and whatnot. So it's a cool looking pen, and I do like my one Esterbrook that I have. So got that filled up. Okay, so let's get this final swatch. I used up all my glass rods, so that's the nice thing. If you don't use these, just put it in some water and wiping off with a towel, and you're easily good to go for another sample. So I learned that from Olive Octopus Ink. She just has a whole stack of them, and she just goes through from when you're doing a stream. It's less back and forth of having to clean them, so very handy. Or if you're swatching a lot of inks, I think it's like, these are 20 cents each or something like that, and they come in like big packages, so it's just as easy to get a large package and then go through them, or if she hands them out at Pen Club because she has a lot. Just handy to have for ink related swatching activities. And I was a big Q-tip ink swatcher until seeing, she gave me one of these at one of the first pen clubs we went to, and this just shows better color. I wish I would have used one of these for all the ink vent calendars, because some of the inks, the colors, I don't think my initial swatches, and I was really new to swatching inks at that point, showed the true colors, because the Q-tip was absorbing too much at the time. So this is Colorverse. Now I do have a lot more Colorverse inks because I did the ink vent calendar, but I haven't decided if I want to put all of the ink vent inks into this kind of collection, because a lot of those, at least the diamines, I don't ever see using. Now, some of the Colorverse I do have in pins and have been using, so I could see adding those because they've gotten use, but I'm not a big shimmer or super sheener, so I'm still in debate of whether or not those are going to end up in the big Rolodex at some point. They probably will, just because when I bought this thing, and just let's see, I had no idea how large this actually is. So my selection of all the inks that I have, see if we can get it to slide around enough. That's all my inks in that one little section, and I've got the rest of that entire wheel, so I might as well fill them up. I've got a couple more packs of cards, so we'll see. That'll be a future stream though, where I'll probably just do that as its own, revisiting the Colorverse calendar or something like that. But let's get some of these others sorted in. I think they've had enough time to dry. So the Diamine Blue Black, let it focus there. And that is a good representation. You can see the mixture where it's just enough blue to know it's there, but it could still be used for anything official, I would say. So here's the diamine section. Pop that in there. And then the roller and clinger, I did not put the card in yet, so we'll just put it here. And I mentioned this one earlier, that if you didn't see the stream when I did it, this is my favorite green currently. The Teranishi Guitar Gentle Green, when this swatches down, it's teal. And then as it dries, it turns into the green with that little bit of reddish sheen to it. This is a great ink. It's just so different. And I'm looking to see if I have it easy to access. This is one thing we were talking about at Pen Club with colors. And here, I think I can get to it. So Irreful paper. In here, I swatched on Irreful. And so this is that same ink. But Irreful locks the ink in when you swatch it, and it doesn't let it change colors. So this is why it's really important to swatch on what you're going to be writing on, because if you're expecting, oh, I know what Gentle Green looks like. It's going to turn green with a red sheen, and then you swatch that and it stays in that blue teal. For writing, it might not be the biggest deal, but if you're using it for art or painting with it, that could really change. Yeah, and it you're right, spot on, Jana. It does dry down in a matte where the Irreful mattes out when it doesn't change. So you can see the little lines where it has a little bit of the red that pops out, but it never gets to the green. It doesn't allow the oxidation. So that was just really interesting to see that effect on that paper. Because Irreful is getting more popular now that, Tomoe River is a crapshoot of if you're getting good Tomoe or bad Tomoe, or how it's going to behave. So just something to be aware of. So here's the Rohrer and Klinger card. So just going back, the royal blue, that's just reminds me of pilot blue. Just a good, blue color with a little bit of variation in there, a little bit of shading, but not overly so. So a good royal blue. I'm not familiar with that one. I'll have to go look that up after this, Jana. Do you have a video on that on your channel? If so, I'll go search for that. And then the magenta. That's a nice magenta color there. Seeing that pop through. And I actually just realized I'm going to do one more ink because it's sitting on my desk over here, and it's one that all I've done with it so far is pull a sample to give to Olive Octopus at a coffee meetup that we're doing at Butler Stationery tomorrow. But this is actually pop over to this camera. This is actually a limited edition ink. It's by Private Reserve, and it's called Kickstart My Heart Red. So this is actually a numbered ink, where this is bottle, come on, focus, 891 of 1,000. So this is one of the first inks I've ever seen where the bottles of ink are numbered, which I don't know what I feel about that, but I picked it up from Butler, supporting the local store and the curiosity of it. He had 4 bottles and he hadn't actually swatched it, so we swatched it. So his store had a swatch when I picked it up. But, because I really love Oxblood, I've been using Writer's Blood in my Viper since I got it. So let's go in and swatch this one. So let me make a card for it. Do the full thing here. So we got Private Reserve. Okay, I'll go check that out, Jana. It's always good to be able to reference, because swatches show so much. Video can sometimes show it better or sometimes show it worse, depending on lighting. So I like to look at multiple sources when I'm dealing with something ink-wise, just to see. You never know how things are lit. And having enough background in photography and knowing how many lights I have in my office to be able to hopefully have decent lighting on all of these swatches and whatnot, seeing it in person and on the paper you're going to use really makes a difference. And since I have the Aerofil out, I'll actually swatch this on the Aerofil as well, and we can see if it does any kind of crazy reaction. So let's start with just the Col-O-Ring card. And I don't think I have any other Private Reserve inks. I think this is my first Private Reserve as well. So definitely has a blood red color. And this looks like it's going to be one that takes a while to dry, just from first impression of seeing how it's laying on there. And this goes on so wet, it's actually making this card fold up a little bit, which is interesting. Most of these other inks, the card is not curling up like it was for this. I guess I should have kept that glass rod out, but I can grab another one. So let's put put that up here and let it dry. And let's put this on the Aerofil and see if it does any kind of weird color shift on here. Oh wow. I mean, you can see that paper is just absorbing in that color and making it pink. I'm glad I had this out. That's definitely not an expected response on this. So you can see it's a really, where it goes on thick, I mean, you can hold the paper and it's going to drip down the page. Now it's not, you can see on the back, but it's not dripping through or anything like that. But that single layer, I mean, you can see it absorbed almost immediately, and it's like a light pink, where on this Col-O-Ring card, even though it's still drying, I mean, let's get that where it focuses enough. The lens overhead is a manual focus, so it's not going to hunt for me. But looking at that, you know, if you had a light layer on Aerofil, you'd be hard pressed to know that that's the same color. That's drying so much lighter on this. And it's like Jana, you were saying, it kind of mattes it down. It's doing that exactly on this. It's making it all matte. It's taking away any kind of the shine. Let me switch over. You can really see the matte coming through more on that camera versus the Col-O-Ring card. So just interesting to see, you know, the paper can make a huge difference. That's why normally most of my swatching, and I'll have to go through and do my new inks on it. I actually have here, this is original Tomoe, a little thing Vanessa made years ago. And I almost want to go through and re-swatch all these because they were all done with Q-tip, and I can see how dull the colors are. Knowing what I know now, you know, I'm going to get much better color using the glass rods. But this is cream Tomoe, and then I also have it swatched on white Rhodia, white Tomoe, the Col-O-Ring cards, and then the color swatch cards. You know, so that way I have a good reference of wherever I might be wanting to use an ink. So, you know, it's always good. And this overhead camera is, for some reason, showing really dark right now. It looks like I'm going to have to add a different light, I think, for it, or change its settings. But, you know, that is still, switch back to this one. Those drips are drying slow. And that color is just completely matted, where this looks more like a little bit lighter oxblood. Let me pull the oxblood card out of here and show that next to it. Diamine. Birmingham, Noveler. Well, where'd my diamine section go? There we go, diamine. So there's the oxblood and the writer's blood. Okay. So here's the Kickstart My Heart Red next to oxblood and writer's blood. And even on, you know, I love Col-O-Ring cards, but colors do show differently. The writer's blood, it doesn't really show the sheen. Now on this corner of it here, you can see a little bit of the lighter. Using that in the Viper, you see more of the variation when actually writing versus swatching. But it's definitely like a little bit of a lighter version of oxblood. So, yeah, just an interesting comparison. And then Let me come back to the overhead camera here. Man, that's really dark. Let me see if I can light that up at all, just for at least momentarily. Yeah, so that's helping a little bit, but that camera's just extra dark. Just a completely different look on those, and that actually is, I think, hurting more than helping, so turn that off. So just interesting to see, you know, similar inks, you know, for it to be a limited edition. You know, am I going to use it? I'm sure I'll use it eventually for something, but you know, I got it more to have something that was unique and be able to support the local store. But overall, you know, it'll be nice to have in the swatch book. But you know, this really shows on this earful how it mats down. You know, I mean, look at that. You'd be hard pressed. You know, it takes any of the other properties out of that. And then the dark spots don't even dry dark. But I'm not familiar with that one, Jana. Maybe someone in the chat, or there's only a couple people on right now, but hopefully someone can answer that question for you. Let me put this over here so it can finish drying. Okay, so pop back over here. So we got, I think this was yeah. Let's look at these diamine cards. Pop back in here. And I went to the wrong camera here. Get the diamines put back in. The private reserve. And it does seem like it is dry. So it's dried fairly quickly, at least on the Col-O-Ring card. And then I guess I had already put the Colorverse divider in. There we go. So I've got the Colorverse divider, and add in the coffee break. So to test this, because I haven't actually had a chance to use it on the chat, see if that pops up. There we go. With Jana's question, in case you don't see the chat, if anybody knows if Graphilio matches. So if you do, Jana has a YouTube channel. You know, you might be able to add a comment there, or you know, find her on Instagram or something like that if you have an answer. Thanks for coming, Jana. You know, always great to have people hopping in and watching. This was kind of spur of the moment. Okay, so let me switch back over to, let's see. So that's going to kind of wrap this one up. You know, I appreciate everybody sticking around, and I think from looking at my ink shelf, aside from the ink vent, I've got probably one more day aside from ink vent to get all these knocked out and re-added into this, and then I plan to start the pen inventory, which will be the other side of the Rolodex. I'm looking at getting one of the little sticker printers to take a picture of the pen, put on the card, kind of write a couple sentences of, you know, where I have it or where I got it, the history of it or something like that. So be interesting to see that. So once again, thanks for watching. I did want to mention I did just open up channel memberships to help support the channel to continue making videos. It's starting as a very basic thing where it has a couple of special emojis. There's like an Aroshizuku bottle that you can use in chats. You can do a nib, a notebook, and then a unboxing kind of question mark. I just qualified for that with YouTube, so I added that on. I think it's like $1.99 a month or something like that. So if that's something that interests you to help support the channel, feel free to look into it. There's a link in this description of this video. Other than that, I've got some other videos that I've been working on that'll be coming out. Probably the next one will be in a couple of days. And then this morning, the interview with Nick Pasquale of Pins by Pasquale released, and that was a great interview. Now that I've got a couple under my belt, it feels like it's getting a little bit more natural to do the interviews and talk to people, so definitely check that out. But Once again, thanks for sticking around and watching, and I'll see you next time I'm streaming. Have a good one.